The training facility on Station Korath 7 was the finest in the entire Velox sector. Every species in the Galactic Council sent their young ones there to learn discipline, order, and the proper ways of civilization. The instructors were chosen from the most respected warrior races. They knew how to shape minds and bodies into perfect soldiers and citizens. Instructor Varkeen had trained thousands of young beings over his 40 cycles of service. His scales were gray with age, but his voice could still shake the walls. His whistles were legendary. One sharp blast from his command horn could freeze a full-grown Tyrillian warrior in place. He had never failed to break any student who came through his doors, until the Korath cubs arrived. The Korath were a new species to the Council. They had been discovered on a forest world at the edge of known space. Their children looked like small, furry creatures with large, round eyes and soft paws. They walked on 4 legs but could stand on 2 when needed. Their ears were tall and always moving, catching every sound in the room. There were 12 cubs in total. The Council had sent them to learn proper behavior before their species could be fully accepted into galactic society. Their parents had agreed, hoping their children would return as civilized beings ready to represent their world. But something was wrong from the very first day. Varkeen stood before the cubs and blew his command whistle. The sound was sharp and painful. Every species responded to it with instant obedience. It triggered a primal fear response that no being could ignore. The cubs looked at him with their big eyes. Then they went back to playing with each other. Varkeen blew the whistle again, harder this time. The sound echoed through the training hall. Other students from different species immediately stood at attention. Their bodies went stiff with conditioned fear. The Korath cubs did not even blink. One of them yawned and rolled onto its back. This was impossible. Varkeen had trained the most stubborn species in the galaxy. He had shaped the wild Drexen warriors who ate their enemies. He had disciplined the chaos-loving Tricken who had no concept of order. But these small, furry creatures acted as if his whistle was nothing more than background noise. He tried louder sounds. He tried different frequencies. He tried the fear-inducing scream that could make a Velox soldier cry. Nothing worked. The cubs continued to play, sleep, and ignore every command. Days passed, then weeks. Other instructors tried their methods. They used bright lights, loud noises, and harsh tones. They withheld food. They separated the cubs from each other. They used every technique that had worked on 10,000 different species. The Korath cubs became more withdrawn. They stopped eating well. They huddled in corners and made sad sounds. But they still did not obey. They could not be trained. They could not be reached. The Council grew worried. If the Korath could not be taught civilization, they would have to be classified as a primitive species. They would lose their chance to join galactic society. Their world might even be quarantined. Then someone suggested the human. Dr. Sarah Chen was a xenobiologist stationed on the far side of the station. She studied how different species developed and learned. Most of the military instructors thought her work was useless soft science. Humans themselves were still considered a strange addition to the galaxy. They had no natural weapons, no armor, no special abilities. They were weak and slow compared to proper warrior races. But humans had one quality that puzzled every other species. They seemed to form connections with creatures that should have been impossible to bond with. On their homeworld, they had tamed wolves into loyal companions. They kept prey animals as friends. They talked to plants and claimed the plants grew better because of it. It was nonsense, most species agreed. But nothing else was working with the cubs. Sarah Chen walked into the training facility without any equipment. She wore simple clothes. She had no whistle, no horn, no device to make loud sounds. The instructors watched from behind a viewing screen, ready to see another failure. The cubs were huddled in the far corner of the room. They had stopped playing days ago. Their fur was dull and their eyes were sad. They did not look up when the door opened. They expected more harsh sounds and punishment. Sarah sat down on the floor. She did not approach them. She did not make any demands. She simply sat there, making herself small and unthreatening. Minutes passed in silence. Then she smiled. It was a simple expression. Her lips curved upward and her eyes became soft and warm. In human culture, it was the most basic sign of friendliness. It meant safety. It meant no harm would come. One of the cubs lifted its head. Its ears turned toward her, sensing something different. This being was not making loud sounds. This being was not trying to hurt them. This being was doing something with its face that felt good. The cub made a small sound. It was curious. Sarah did not move. She kept smiling, patient and calm. She had worked with frightened animals all her life. She knew that trust could not be forced. It had to be given freely. Another cub looked up, then another. Soon all 12 were watching her with their round eyes. They had never seen this expression before. The other species did not smile. Their faces did not move in this way. Communication among most galactic races was done through sounds, colors, or chemical signals, but humans had evolved differently. They had learned to show their emotions on their faces, and right now, Sarah's face was showing the cubs that they were safe. The bravest cub took a step forward, then another step. Sarah remained still, her smile never changing. The cub came closer until it was right in front of her. It sniffed her hand carefully. Sarah slowly turned her palm upward, offering it without grabbing. The cub placed its paw on her hand. Its fur was soft and warm. Sarah made a gentle sound, a low hum that vibrated in her chest. The cub made a sound back. It was the same frequency. Behind the viewing screen, Instructor Varkeen leaned forward. This was impossible. The cub was responding. It was communicating. More cubs came forward. They surrounded Sarah, sniffing her and touching her with their soft paws. She smiled at each one. She did not rush them. She let them come to her on their own terms. Then she did something that shocked every instructor watching. She began to play with them. She rolled a small ball across the floor. One cub chased it and brought it back. She praised the cub with warm sounds and more smiles. The cub's tail wagged with happiness. Soon, other cubs wanted to play too. They tumbled over each other to reach the ball. They made sounds that could only be described as laughter. In 1 hour, Sarah Chen accomplished what weeks of harsh training could not. The cubs were engaged. They were happy. They were responding to simple commands, not because they were afraid, but because they wanted to please this strange being who smiled at them. The head of the training facility called an emergency meeting. Scientists and instructors gathered to discuss what they had witnessed. How had this human succeeded where everyone else had failed? Sarah explained it simply. The Korath were a social species. On their homeworld, they lived in family groups bound by love and affection. Harsh sounds meant danger to them. Loud whistles triggered their instinct to freeze and hide, not to obey. Punishment made them withdraw further into themselves. But kindness reached them. Smiles and gentle touches told them they were among friends. Play taught them to trust. Positive reinforcement made them want to learn. This was how humans had trained their companion animals for thousands of years. Not through fear, but through bonds of affection. The instructors were silent. This went against everything they knew about training young beings. Fear was efficient. Fear was universal. Fear worked on almost every species in the galaxy, but not on all of them. Over the following months, Sarah worked with the Korath cubs every day. She taught them language through games. She taught them manners through gentle correction and rewards. She taught them to respect others by showing them respect first. The cubs flourished. They became curious and confident. They asked questions about the galaxy and dreamed of exploring the stars. They learned faster than anyone expected because they wanted to learn, not because they were forced to. When the Korath parents arrived to see their children, They were amazed. Their cubs ran to greet them with joy. They showed off their new skills and spoke about their human teacher with love in their voices. The Korath elders requested a formal meeting with the council. They asked that humans be given a special role in galactic education. They had seen what kindness could accomplish. They wanted other young species to have the same chance. The council debated for a long time. Many military species were uncomfortable with these ideas. They believed strength came from discipline and fear. They did not understand how softness could produce results. But the evidence was clear. The cubs had been transformed, and the human method had worked when nothing else could. Eventually, the council agreed to a trial program. Human educators would be offered positions at training facilities across the galaxy. They would work with species that did not respond to traditional methods. They would bring their strange talent for connection and bonding. Sarah Chen became the first official human ambassador of youth development. She traveled to many worlds and trained local teachers in human methods. She always started the same way. Sit down, make yourself small, smile. The Korath cubs grew up to be the first ambassadors of their species. They carried the lessons of their childhood with them. They remembered the being who had not shouted or punished. They remembered the being who had simply smiled and changed their lives forever. And across the galaxy, other species began to understand something important. Strength was not always about power. Sometimes the strongest thing in the universe was simply a warm smile and an open heart. The humans had proven this in their own way. They were not the fastest or the strongest. They had no claws or scales or venom. But they had learned long ago that the greatest bonds were forged through kindness. And in a galaxy full of warriors and conquerors, that simple truth was revolutionary. The cubs never forgot, and neither did the galaxy.